checkbox system, which is, again, in everything we see is a product of something. It's a product of how we have previously behaved, how we've been sort of programmed to think and see things. So if we see that, they want us to hire minority groups, okay, panic, get one in. Then announce it to the world and then ask the world to applaud you because you've got a minority group now. Show them off. I'm done. My job is done. You see, I got one minority group. I am a champion of diversity. Yay. When we succeed, do we look back? We habitually run our race going forward, and sometimes stepping all over dead bodies and never even stopping to recognize who they are. I honestly do not think this is how to be human. I think we have to build in time to look back, to look at who's fallen down and why they're falling down, and if there's anything we can.
Welcome to the HR L&D Podcast with your host, Nick Day. Tune in to discover what it takes to truly develop within human resources as we delve deep into growth, engagement, and leadership strategies that will help you unlock the hidden potential within your business. By listening to this podcast, we hope to empower you and your workforce towards achieving significant HR organizational success.
Hello and welcome back to the HR L&D podcast. Today I'm joined by Margaret Ochieng, who is a business psychologist, a diversity and inclusion consultant and founder at the Inclusive Village, where Margaret designs workplace solutions that enable people and organisations to adopt a village culture approach to inclusion. Now, I met with Margaret at a recent Recruitment and Diversity event hosted by CIPD London, where both Margaret and I were invited to form part of an expert panel. Now, I absolutely loved her thought leadership approach to diversity and inclusion, which is why I was delighted that she was happy to join me today for a more detailed conversation on this podcast. Margaret's approach to D&I helps individuals and organisations to identify and remove barriers to inclusion, performance and creativity posed by silos, clans and tribes that often emerge explicitly or implicitly in social groups, including, of course, the workplace. As part of the Village Spirit, Margaret is organising a fantastic event for women who want to be game changers in March, so stay tuned to find out more about that later on in the podcast as well. So without further ado, let me welcome Margaret Ochieng to the HR L&D podcast.
5 quick questions. Understanding where we are to know where we are going.
My name is Margaret Ochieng. I was born and spent most of my life in Kenya. So I have lived here just over 10 years now. And so my career started in Kenya. And so when I moved here about 10 years ago, part of that has been the longest time I've spent in an industry was about 8 years. And that was spent in the charitable sector in various roles like fundraising and raising grants to help poverty projects in developing countries. And so while I worked in the charitable sector, I had a chance of working with people who were based in different parts of the world. So there was a time I was working with a global board that were in, I think, 9 different countries, I think 4 or 5 different time zones at the same time. And earlier on in my career, I started off, I've worked in the aviation sector. I've held various marketing roles. So my career has been evolving as my life has changed. But then a few years ago, about 5 years ago or so, I started to notice something. So having spent about 7 years up until that time in the charitable sector, there was something I was seeing, especially based here, that was not matching with my expectation. There was something I wanted to bring on board. I saw that organizations needed to embrace something that unites the world, a common conversation around culture and inclusivity and change. And so that kind of triggered, and my own sort of career experiences triggered me to change careers and come into this space as a business psychologist, and then moving on to diversity and leadership consulting, which is what I spend most of my time doing now.
Wow. So you've got a real varied background, starting, as you say, in Kenya. You've been over here now for nearly 10 years. So you've got real experience in dealing with real cross-cultural working practices, I'm sure. And I know you've got a huge passion for helping individuals at all levels as well, and very much, across cultures, you sort of help navigate and challenge barriers to career satisfaction, career progression, personal development, and things like that. what do you think everyone needs in order to have a fair chance to thrive? And can you tell me more about the kind of human-centric work that you've been doing to encourage that?
Yeah, so I think most of us assume if everything lines up for you from the time you're born to how you're raised and you happen to just grow up and thrive, I think you would rightfully assume that that's how the world works for everyone. And so for each and every one of us, I think we will be holding some of these assumptions. So if not in one area, then in the other. And when it so happens on a global scale, so if you're looking at sort of the North and South divide in terms of power and balance across the globe, it does mean that people who grew up, say, in the Western world it's just something that skips their minds. They just don't know what the experiences of other people who grew up elsewhere in the world, or who are from elsewhere in the world, or who grew up here and had a different experience would be like. And so research has shown, and people's experiences show, that if we then meet at one place, so say in this country, and we all have all these different experiences, we are all coming from different backgrounds, that some of us might be having certain challenges navigating the workplace or navigating society. And then there's a cross-section who just are not even aware of what those challenges are. And so my work is around helping the other side see and understand why you cannot assume that the playfield is level for everybody. But also, if the playfield is not level for you, what can you do at a personal level, working with everybody to help you manage and navigate what is a really unleveled playfield. So it does take the two worlds meeting to try and write something that is much, much bigger and much, much more complicated than we can actually describe.
Presumably, this is something that's becoming more and more of a challenge, or certainly becoming more to the surface of businesses, because we're going a lot more, in an era of globalization. Companies that may have been just UK focused with a small, predominantly UK workforce are now experiencing growth into global markets. They're now, are getting, I guess, more exposed to dealing with different cultures, and perhaps their workforce is becoming more global as well. So are you seeing a real rise in these challenges as a result of that, this sort of era of globalization? How have you seen things develop?
Absolutely. So we do know that there's loads of people who are qualified and educated and are being produced from universities and all sorts of learning institutions. But many companies will still say there is a talent gap, that finding the right person for the jobs that you have is still a big challenge globally, no matter where you are. Because of this, and just the changes that we know, that we're living in a more volatile, ever-changing world, less predictable, that if you are going to stay on top of the talent agenda, if you're going to have the best people come working for you, then you have to stop looking in the one place that you've been looking. You have to stop looking in the same way that you have been looking. And that means you're going to have to bring all sorts of people in your organization. You have to look at the wide range of talent that you probably haven't considered before. And the problem with that is that organizations will have been traditionally sort of designed as a box. And this is the human-centric piece that changes everything. It's a box. That's our view of organizations. Everyone has to come in and fit into your box. So you slot in here, you slot in here. I can just maybe move you around and you all slot into different places, but you all have to fit in my box. And if you do not fit in my box, either I will make your experience really negative or I will kick you out of my box. Now that is, I think, an outdated way of looking at organizations, because I think the people should come in first, and then you can build whatever you want to build around and across them. You have to innovate the way organizations are structured and designed, because the people who are coming in are going to come in into all shapes, sizes, backgrounds, and have you created the space where they're going to land? So it was all fine when we first started, maybe, many, many years ago. You would have said in the factories or the industrial period that, you'd have the men working in a factory in a certain section and there were no women coming in. When the women came in, then that space has changed. So you can no longer say it's your little box where the men come and fit in. You have to redesign this space. And many organizations are lagging behind in terms of putting the human beings at the center and how the human beings and their needs are changing. They're just catching up. And that's what we call human-centric sort of workplace, is thinking through what type of new human beings, what types of human beings are now in my workplace, and how does my workplace need to change to keep up with the changes that I'm seeing in the workforce and in the world around me.
I think that's a fantastic and very, very clear explanation. And it's music to my ears as a recruiter, because obviously one thing we're always trying to do is to widen the talent pools that we can access for clients. And I think from a recruitment perspective, I think one of the terms that I am sort of really trying to work against, and it's one of the most common said phrases I hear, is that we need someone who's going to fit in with our culture. We need, or we get rejection because a candidate isn't the right, and I use the word in inverted commas, culture fit. So what I think is really important is we need to dispel that myth of you need to be the right culture fit. And we should be looking at individuals that can evolve the culture. And that does mean coming outside of those boxes. And if I can get more clients to, come at me with that mindset of, okay, we need someone that's going to evolve the culture, which may be from all kinds of diverse backgrounds that may enable that to happen, but not just, it doesn't have to be like a background that relates to an ethnic background or anything like that. It can also be from the sectors. It can be from different, it's so wide ranging in all of us to be able to widen that panel. What would you say if you're in my shoes and you were trying to educate a client to say, okay, well, I think you want to evolve your culture, but I want you to try and open your mind to that, which is really difficult for me, right? It's one of the biggest challenges I face.
I think it's the right thing. I think that the word evolving your culture is the thing to do, because who created this? So if you have a culture, who created it, for example? Who created your culture? Are they still even there? What you're calling your culture was created by a group of people about 60 or 70 years ago. Now they're dead, but you still hang on to that culture. A really simple question. This culture you have, who has created it? Are they still in the organization? How did it come about? Because culture is created by people. It doesn't create itself. Now, if there are new people, then they should evolve the culture that was created previously. But what we're seeing with the organizations that are asking you for culture fit are people who are saying, we have this culture. It's been going on for 200 years. We will not change it, though we know generations are changing. We know that global travel and global movements are changing the demographics of our societies everywhere in the world. I go to Nairobi now, and sometimes I'm like, which country is this? Because it is so diverse. People have moved from Asia, and it's a cosmopolitan city. There's people from all over the world. Now, that's the same as London. That's the same as modern cities. Now, if you're saying that this is our culture, who created it? When was it created? Why was it created? What was it created for? Are those things still relevant for us or for you today? So the whole thought about evolving your culture is a conversation that I think people should not avoid if they want the organization to keep up.
Totally get that. And obviously, as a specialist D&I consultant yourself, do you think that a lot of this culture fit excuse, for want of another word, sometimes if they want to reject somebody for they use that reason, is it down to inherent fear of change? To take that a point further, do you think that therefore things are getting better or worse from a diversity and inclusion sort of front end perspective?
Yes, absolutely. So I think when people say culture fit and do not want to work around their culture, it's the fear of change. And it's a fear of unknown. If I change this is all I've ever known. People, then that culture has produced identities in people. We know that people are very, everybody is keen on protecting their identity, because protecting your identity helps you preserve your self-esteem, helps you to have some sort of continuity in your life. So anything that threatens what you think is attached to your identity might be resisted. It might be seen as something that you may not like. Now, in terms of diversity and inclusion, if you say, have things changed, have things progressed, I would say yes and no. so let's go with a yes first. So in one of my jobs of the Parker Review, which is trying to illuminate ideas of increasing ethnic minority representation on FTSE boards. So ethnic minorities are very senior levels, and they were having a sort of like a review of the work that they did a few years ago. And so I thought that was a really good place to start if you're going to say, have things improved? And I saw some improvement out of this report. It's a report I would say, most people should look at. So, for example, for the FTSE 100 companies, there was a 63, I think, percent of, 63% of the companies that they surveyed had at least now one director of color on their board, compared to, say, 3 or 4 years ago, which I think is when the other report was produced. So that's an improvement. And there was a 31% as well that met their target for FTSE 250. So, from a research point of view, we have seen, the targets are off track anyway. We don't know if they will be met, but there's still time for people to do something. There's also some really growing, powerful conversations across all industries. We've seen when people have done some things, and the media and the social media pick up on it straight away. So, for example, the Gucci blackface sweater, for example, there was a media it went wild. People protested. What happened to Meghan and Harry's child, the monkey comparison. So things like, we're seeing that people are more aware of what can or cannot be said. Not everyone is, but we're seeing that this is now a mainstream conversation, and people from different backgrounds and parts of our society are coming out, whether it's something against women or something against the LGBT community or something against race, that people from different parts of the of our society are coming forward to say, this is not how we would like to be seen. This is not how we would like to be represented. Just, I think, was it last week, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the church is one of our biggest and oldest and probably widest reaching institutions globally. The Archbishop of Canterbury officially said that we know that the church is institutionally racist and we should do something about it. Now, that's something that we couldn't have thought might happen 10 years ago. It's happening now. So are things changing for better? I think we could say yes, to some extent. There's some traction around the issue of diversity. We are beginning to see there's some sort of awareness and awakening. It's not too widespread, but there is progress.
More in the public consciousness now, perhaps.
Absolutely. We have managed, through the work of so many people over the years, I think we are starting to get into people's consciousness, and we're starting to make this a more conscious issue. People might resist it, but they can no longer say they have never heard of it, or that they don't know it exists. So that is a good progress.
Sure. On
the other side, however, we do know that last year a report came out of BME senior executives. I think it was a Green Park report, that the numbers had dropped. The number of non-white board executives, senior executives, had dropped from 9% in 2018 to 7.4% in 2019. Now, when all these things, when I'm saying we're making progress, there's more people, and then we see this kind of drops, then you have to think, what is really going on? So that's the suspicious side that we have to investigate. The government figures also show that, there have been higher reported cases, the cases of hate crime, are rising year on year for the last 5 years. So it does show that something or someone is keen to fight back.
And we're seeing that. I mean, I'm outside of work. Sorry to stop. Outside of work, so I'm a huge football fan, right? And I wonder if this public consciousness also then provides you with a choice, right? Because you then know if it's been spoken about and it's been made more aware, then it gives people a choice. And unfortunately, we're seeing in the football, in particular, football circles, a huge rise in racism over the last 12 months that I personally didn't see it coming. I thought we were making huge progress with the things like the Kick It Out campaign, and you felt like we were in a good space. And suddenly there's been a huge eruption of sort of racist abuse being found within football grounds, which are very public events, should be family-friendly events, where people now feel like they're able, for whatever reason, empowered, and whether that's due to the public consciousness piece or not, I don't know, but they feel more empowered now to be discriminative in public. And that's got to be a real concern, I would think.
Absolutely. And I am under no illusion that we're going to see less of that. I think we're going to see more of it because, as I said to you, when people who are resistant to change will always see change as taking something away from their identity. Now, they are very preoccupied with trying to preserve something, whether that is self-esteem or continuity or something. By seeking to prevent that, then they're likely to just be more sort of hardlined and resisting and being on the extreme end. So we're more likely to see this kind of things. I like that you've raised the football sort of picture. I think is a really good example of where we see that people now feel that if you have the permission to protest this, I have the permission to reflect it on you some more. It becomes some sort of a battle, which is a shame, but that is a reality. And, it's not just in football. We know that because many organizations have then gone through such efforts to try and diversify, especially their senior leadership, because we do know that at lower levels in many organizations, the representation is there. If an organization is still struggling to recruit minority groups or women or LGBT at the lower levels, then we do know that is an unusual organization. So something needs doing. However, I think the battle is at senior levels. This is what I refer to: the higher you go, the whiter it becomes, and probably the maler it becomes, because of what we know about leadership, what people have kind of historically built in their minds as the ideal sort of prototype of a leader. And anything that does not fit that prototype, anyone who does not fit that prototype is rejected, consciously or unconsciously. So as organizations try to bring minority groups into leadership, we have an established system who has an idea of what a leader should or should not be like. These minority groups then start to experience what is really a hostile leadership environment. So that's the other part of, are things improving or not? Well, for the minority groups who are going to take up leadership, they're going to be solos. They're going to be one of. For a long, long time, we're going to have ones of, because the ones we've recruited are now leaving according to this Green Park report. And the reason that's happening is because the environment, that box I was talking about earlier, has a shape that they had to fit because they came in and they want the shape that the box needs. So the box has just tortured them out of place.
So how much do you think then this is, the improvements are down to, God, I don't want to put it this way, but checkbox exercises, if you like, for some of the larger corporates. And I've heard a few terms as well of something called diversity fatigue. They kind of do the two elements play together? Do you think that some of these decisions are checkbox exercise, or do you think there is genuine change of leadership boards really wanting to improve the diversity on their boards, or do you think it's the foremost, trying to check a box?
So let's look at the checkbox system, which is, again, in everything we see is a product of something. It's a product of how we have previously behaved, how we've been sort of programmed to think and see things. So if we see that, they want us to hire minority groups, okay, panic, get one in. Then announce it to the world and then ask the world to applaud you because you've got a minority group now. Show them off. I'm done. My job is done. You see, I got one minority group. I am a champion of diversity. Yay. This is the checkbox exercise thing. So recruit some minority, just one or two, and count the job done without thinking, have I changed? How does my culture look like? What kind of culture am I bringing these people into? What are my motives really for bringing, minority groups in the workplace? Do I really believe that they are the talent that are going to evolve and change my workplace and give me the competitive edge over everyone else? Your motives, your culture, the reasons why you're doing this are really just as important as doing it itself. And most people forget that. They go in and say, good, we brought in 3, minority, we brought in 2 women, 3 that, 4 this. It's all about the numbers. And again, it's that piece around human-centered workplaces. Do not look at people as numbers so you count them 1, 2, 3. This is what I can see. These are human beings. They're not numbers. And you have to think about how your organization is bringing them on board, onboarding them, looking after them, and fulfilling their own. These people have ambitions and their own reasons for coming to you. So do not think that you're doing them a favor, bringing them on board. It's like work done, boxes ticked. No, those people have ambitions. They've come there to do work, to improve your business. If you're not going to give them the space to grow, to contribute, to be authentically themselves, then you've wasted your time. So checkbox system things just don't work. And then just this, you've mentioned one of my things I really dislike to hear about, diversity fatigue.
Well, I was scared to mention it, but I've read about diversity fatigue.
So there's a story I tell about my recent encounter with diversity fatigue. I was talking to somebody who runs a medium-sized company. And I'm talking about, just as I've been talking to you about organizational culture and why the culture where the, people are brought into is really important into how they're supported and how making that more sort of about the people rather than about the box. And he rolls his eyes and say, diversity and inclusion again, literally rolls his eyes. What is that all about? So later on, I went onto this person's website, because I thought that he's saying that because he's done so much work around diversity that he's just so tired, I went to look at this person's website and there was, majority, white male workforce of actually a certain age as well. There was one woman and her photo was to the right side corner. So thinking, goodness me, I wonder how she feels about that. But there was nobody else. And that got me really angry. I felt like picking up the phone and calling him and telling him, you did not roll your eyes at me because you have not done any work with the diversity of your leadership team. How can you be tired about it? And the truth about this diversity fatigue is people refusing to connect with the subject, is people refusing to be resilient enough to continue with the topic of diversity. It's like, oh, no, just take it away. I haven't got the strength. For me, what I really would like to, if I was to go back into this conversation again with this gentleman, I would tell them, I need you to build your resilience so you can stay with this issue, because this issue is not going away. The world is changing. Your organization is changing. The world around you is changing. It's not business as usual. Talent, as you've always known it, has evolved. You need to have the resilience to evolve with the times. So you need to pay attention and stay with the issue and stay with the topic. The other side of that fatigue is, this is the bit I understand, of the champions like me and you who are trying to explain this to other people. We are tired for a good reason. We are tired because people are rolling their eyes. We are tired because we are now seeing more people shouting and insulting other people at football matches. We are tired because we are afraid that we might not make the progress despite so much effort and so much investment that is being made on the issue. And for that, I think there's something around how we look after ourselves, how some level of self-care that we should prioritize if we are going to stay with the issue, if we're not going to burn out. And that's something I think in the coming months I would really like to explore. How do we look after ourselves knowing that bigotry and the system as we know it is going to fight back? We need to be ready. So we are the ones who should be tired, not the other side. The other side, we're going to work with them to build their resilience so they can, stay with the issue and do not check out and do not roll your eyes. I do not think that anyone who hasn't done, even if you've done much, if we think, the figures that we're asking for one person on a board of a FTSE 100 company, that is not much of a change, is it? That's not something that should get someone tired. So I do not think that the time for fatigue is now. And I'd like us to get that word fatigue out of people's vocabulary straight away. Let's talk about how we can build the resilience of organizations, of people who hold power, the decision makers, so that they can stay with the issue, so they can improve their workplaces, so they can create a better work environments that everyone can come and thrive. And then let us support the champions and see how they can how we can support them with their own self-care so they can be able to support the agenda beyond the decade that we are in now.
I know that's something you've got as well, is you're a big believer in something which you term, I think, it's calling sort of adopting a village culture approach to inclusion. So can you tell us a little bit more about, obviously you're a founder of the Inclusive Village anyway, which is your business, but tell us a little bit more about how a business can do more to adapt to what you would call a sort of a village approach.
Yes, it's something that is still kind of under wraps because I'm still developing it. But the essence of it is this. I think you hear a lot of organizations talking, people talking about these things of clans and tribes as like the new things that people should be and adopt in the workplace. Now, I happen to have the privilege to have grown up in a place where I belonged to a clan. So my clan is called Kadem. My tribe is called Luo. I lived in a village, like most of you here do. And then there's the wider thing of a country and community, and then the globe. So I have a different sense of, when you're looking at these things from outside in, it's very easy for you to think that what you're seeing is correct. But for someone who's lived through this, who know what those terms mean, I can see how when we transfer those terms to organizational settings, we still don't get it right. What do tribes do? Tribes build an identity. Your tribes are kind of united by blood. You can't, tribes really, if you know the origin of tribes, you did not join a tribe, you were born into a tribe. It's the same as a clan. So if, it's when you tell people, you're telling people, come together with people with whom you share a lot in common and with whom, you have a lot in common with. And it's almost like if I'm in your tribe, those guys are in the other tribe. There's a very clear distinction between my tribe and your tribe. Now, think of it in an organizational setting. How helpful do you think that view of those words are to us? Or this clan and that clan? So when you start, it's closed, it's siloed, it's the thing that we're trying to get away from because we're trying to open up the workplace. We're trying to get people to interact. We're trying to not just open up the workplace, we're trying to open up the world. The world is open. And so it's an idea that I'm developing. I really would like to see how organizations can move beyond some of these words that they sound really sexy. They sound like they're the new things that people should be talking about. But for those of us who intrinsically know what those words mean, sometimes we cringe because we can see those same behaviors being transferred with the use of those words in organizations. And we're like, is this really what you're trying to create? Was this the outcome that you're expecting? So stay tuned for this and many more. I will be exploring this. I have some really interesting anecdotes that I'd like to share in due course. So yeah, but that's in a nutshell is really, what it is about or what it is likely to shape up to be.
Well, it sounds exciting. I will definitely put some links in the episode notes for those interested in finding out more. There's also going to be a link to an amazing event, which we're going to find out a bit more about in section 2 of this podcast as well. So I'll let Margaret explain that a little bit later on. So I know that that story relates to some of the research you've been undertaking recently, which is called the Black Vanguard, which is examining experiences of the most senior Black leaders across 4 UK industries. I know this is research that hasn't been released yet, so obviously I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile in the episode notes here, so if people want to find out more about that research when it's available, Margaret, they'll know where to go. But I wonder if we could just break now to find out a little bit more about you.
Time to find out more about you.
So how do you relax in your downtime? What are the things you get up to outside of your research and outside of your work?
Oh, a lot, actually. So I am a mom. I have 2 children, recently turned 8 and recently turned 4. So I can, I'm impatient I really always want to get out of work so I can go and live my life with my children. That does occupy a big chunk of every free space in my head is probably shopping for toys on Amazon or in the real shops.
I know it well, but you've got the same age gap. My daughter's 10 and my son is 6, so I know the 8 and 4 age gap very well. It's a good, fun age gap, I think. They can still play together, but they've got their own sort of hobbies and interests at the same time, but they can also keep each other entertained.
And so it's busy, it's busy, it's fun, it's ballet, it's football, it's parties, it's all that. But then I also what I've done, what I really enjoy is sharing community. So I moved here, I haven't got family living locally, but I have invested a lot in creating community around me, and most of my time goes into nurturing and building that community around me. So whether those are my Kenyan friends or I'm a committed church member of my local church called Welcome Church in Woking. So, and building loads of friendships there and building community with people is something I'm really interested in. When I have time, I read all sorts. So busy life, fun life, community is really at the core of it, and sharing my life with people is something I absolutely enjoy.
Well, I think there's one thing that's coming across in this podcast. It's your passion for community, whether it's workplace, family, or external. It really does come across, which is fantastic. So in your life to date then, Margaret, who are the 2 people who have been the most influential to you in your career?
Well, that's a really difficult question because my career has changed and evolved so much. So let me just say something that this is, I don't know if I've shared this narrative with people before. So the earlier part of my career before I came to the UK, I felt like my career took off really quickly and I could see myself, being an early bloomer and going places. So this was before the age of 25. But I was in sort of my natural setting. So there wasn't a lot of politics or, there were barriers as there would always be for everyone. And so at that point, I had some family members who'd gone on and done really well. So we grew up in I grew up in a remote sort of part of Kenya, a rural village. And I went to one of the worst schools, I think, at that point anyone could ever go to. So spent most of my life feeling massively undereducated. And maybe that's why I love education, because I do appreciate not having had a decent one in my earlier life. So for me, I think that earlier part of my life was looking at people who'd made it from backgrounds like mine and gone on to do amazing things. And it's still something that I think I've carried on. I remember a few years ago talking about my career with somebody, and the amount of times I talked about inspirational figures. And these are not figures like in my local village. I always looked at people like Barack Obama. I just love the inspiration of people who've done things against odds. So I revel in that, people were the first something to do something. And that's not because it is probably, but I think that's where I really see my inspiration. Was like, wow, that was before this guy, this thing was impossible. And now it's possible for so many people because this one person or this one woman or one man has done it. And I think I always look at figures like that to help me. In recent years, I have a portfolio of entrepreneurs that I kind of follow. Some of them don't know I follow them. But
you and me both.
Yeah, you kind of have your hit list of people you're kind of keeping tabs on them on LinkedIn and reading about stuff they write.
Yeah, sure.
Taking some notes. And often for me, they are people who've come from unusual backgrounds. The people that inspire me the most are the people who've had to overcome odds, because I do feel like if the playfield was level, if all of us had the nurturing and the support and the applause that most people have, I think we would be very successful. But I think there are just many, many barriers for many, many people that cap potential even at a very young age. And I am so interested in the people that, navigate barriers and surmount barriers and come out the other side. And so if you know them, just send them my way, because that's where I get my inspiration.
I could definitely send you some. I've got some, I think if I gave you a list of names that I follow, most people on this podcast probably wouldn't have heard of them, but for me, they're hugely inspiring. So I'll send you some names. But while I know we shared a book that we recommended off there a couple of weeks ago, but there's, I don't know if you've ever come across Guillermo Gomez Pena and Coco Fusco, which are two South American performance artists. But if you haven't, I will definitely send you their links. They are my inspirations, and I think you'll find them quite interesting, because both of them have been challenging, I guess, cross-cultural issues for their entire careers. But Guillermo Gomez Pena is a guy who's and Coco Fusco, who's his female compatriot, if you like. They're both performance artists. They're very independent, and they come together. But you might find them inspirational. So while I was talking this like it's a conversation online, which I'm having now, but I'll share the documentation with you off there. And if anyone's interested, I'll put a link in the episode notes.
So anybody who, for me, and it's the thing you've said, that the people whose stories you have on your podcast, most people would not see, like they'll be like, oh, who's that? And for me, that's where I live, because I'm always trying to find hidden voices. I'm always trying to find sort of hidden heroes, actually, because I think heroism is overrated in certain ways. There are people that we could learn more from based on the amount of work and the amount of sort of obstacles that they've had to navigate to get to where they are. And I think they teach us more, to be fair, than if all things were fine and the sun was shining and you made it to the limelight. I mean, that's great. Well done on you. But I'm more interested in the other people who had to literally crawl and, climb and crawl again and bleed on their way there.
Sure.
And my goal sort of is to try and help people sort of do that crawling. Hopefully no bleeding, but the crawling.
Hopefully not. Yeah, fingers crossed. Well, I'll tell you what, if you get a chance at the end of this recording and you've got a minute spare, go to Google and have a look at Coco Fusco and Guillermo Gomez Pena. And Google, the project they did that inspired me when I first started following these guys, was a project called The Couple in the Cage.
Oh, wow.
You might find it interesting. They did a performance in Covent Garden in 1991, 92. And it's one of those performances which you wouldn't believe actually took place, but it did. And yeah, I'll let you watch the video to follow it. But I think it might be something that you find quite interesting.
I would love that. Yeah, sounds inspirational.
I know I'm going completely off tangent, so apologies for that. So what are the resources that have really helped you on your journey? I know you said you're an avid reader. Are there any kind of resources, doesn't have to be a book, but anything that you would that's really helped you on your career journey today?
Yeah, so I think I go with seasons. It depends on what I'm looking for. So I will read what is in that season. One of the books that I think I'm trying to look around if I can see it, because I haven't seen it in a long time. But I read a book a few years ago called Women Who Run with the Wolves. It's mythical, it's psychological, it's quite a weird book, but I really liked it. And so I kind of like reading that kind of sort of deep psychological, mythical sort of stuff. And sometimes I just read sort of self-help books that can get me there quickly, or like the book that you've just sent me, which I think the Corporate Tribe. I'm definitely going to devour this in the next few days, because I think they're onto a really good idea here, but I think I might come at it at a different angle. So So people do send me all sorts of resources, and I just, it goes with what I'm trying to do. So I change my reading lists based. But I really would encourage women to go with this one.
I'll find it and put a link in the episode notes, so if people are interested, they can go straight there and link it.
Yeah, it's a book that I was reading it, and I decided I didn't want to finish reading it because it was a journey for me. Every chapter I opened, I could see myself traveling through time and unraveling all these sort of stories that she tells. I love stories. So it's sort of like anecdotes and mythical stories that she tells, and then she kind of narrates that to the sort of Jungian psychology. And I absolutely loved it. So yeah, but loads of pieces that inspire me every day. Yeah.
I'll make sure that's linked in the episode notes for those interested in following it. So last question about you before we jump back into section 2. If you could invite 3 people to a dinner party, who would they be and why?
Barack Obama. I would invite him because, again, for me, he crossed a frontier that has really helped sort of change people's perspectives of leadership and achievement. His book, The Audacity of Hope, is just illuminating. It's a story of how you dare to dream. And if you go after it, it just happens. So I would invite Barack and Michelle Obama, if they would ever come. Because of this recent sort of admission that the church is institutionally racist, I would invite the Archbishop of Canterbury. I'd love to ask him, so what you gonna do? And I'd write it all down, or I'd record him, and then I'll go back a year later and say, so what have you done?
I think Barack would be keen to hear as well, to be honest. So he'd be...
Exactly. I think he would be wanting me to share some notes, or to hear what he's got to say. And then people like Toni Morrison, whose poetry I love, poet Maya Angelou. If they came back from the dead, I would invite them, definitely share some time, because I know I would just be on the floor filled with inspiration.
Great. Well, it sounds like it'll be quite an eclectic and fun party, and lots of interesting questions would be posed. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. Well, we're going to jump back in. We're going to go to a quick advert break. When we come back, we're going to find out a little bit more about some implementable actions that hopefully you can share with the group that the listeners can take away. So stay with us.
Have you ever asked yourself, how can any recruiter understand my HR recruitment challenges? Please don't give up on your hiring challenges just yet. Here at JGA HR Recruitment, we appreciate the difficulties associated with attracting, recruiting and retaining top human resources talent. We also understand just how costly a poor hire can be. JGA HR Recruitment would like to partner with you to help you overcome your hiring challenges. Contact us today on 01727 800 377 or visit jgarecruitment.com to find out more.
Shaping the future of human resources together. Final questions.
So, Margaret, if there were some immediate implementable actions you could share with our listeners that they could, I guess, after listening to this podcast, immediately go away and start to implement, what would they be?
Yeah, so first of all is I would, some sort of reflection, thinking through, depending on who you are. Are you a talent practitioner? Are you a head of D&I, or are you a champion, someone who works in this space? I think the first thing is a reflection on your journey, or where are you and what are you trying to achieve? And using data to explain to you why you are where you are. And then using that data to illuminate where you need to be. I think reflection as an organization, as a team, and as a practitioner is core to, understanding these issues. Because, diversity and inclusion, all these things that change the community that we're trying to achieve, it's not a destination. It's always going to be something that we work towards. So just even understanding it as a journey rather than a destination is something that I encourage in practice.
So people need to be more curious, need to ask more questions to keep things...
Absolutely. Asking the right questions was the next thing I was going to say. It's, because these things are quite political, people make them political. So asking questions that do not stop the conversation, but that encourage the conversation, that encourage curiosity around the issue. So, for example, instead of saying what you've seen, I have seen we do not have any women at senior level. Asking the question, phrasing that as a question, what would happen to our organizations what do you think would happen? Especially to very senior leaders, what would happen to organizations if we had more women at senior levels, for example. And that just opens up, it invites everybody in to be a part of that conversation instead of you going and saying, I've looked at the data, we do not have this many number of people. And somebody can say, so, or they can say, we've had you. The conversation is pretty much dead on arrival. So I think just the act of asking open-ended questions and, the resilience to stay with the issue, those open-ended questions will help you to stay with the issue rather than having the door shut down on you. Is something else. And yes, avoiding the checkbox systems. Avoiding the checkbox systems definitely is another one.
And working on, as we say, sticking to that, evolving the culture all the time, and what can take our business forward. I always think as well, if you're doing the same things, you're going backwards, right? And you always need to be evolving, not just your culture in terms of your talent, but actually everything you do should be looking to innovate and looking to change, because that's how you move things forward. So asking more questions, being curious, fantastic, great response. So something I'm really interested to talk about as well is, I know you've got an event coming up, and I'd like to definitely promote it here because it's a game-changing event for people. I'm going to ask you a bit more about it in a minute. It's called A Million Dreams. So I'm going to park that thought because there's something that inspired this event. So before we talk about the event, I know that over the last 4 years, you've said that you've been rewarded with something you call sort of a life-transforming journey, where the word impossible has disappeared from your vocabulary altogether. So I know that's been part of what's inspired the event to come. So we'll talk about the event in just a moment, but I wanted to find out more about what's happened over those 4 years. What was involved in that journey that's really played a part in leading to this transformation?
Yeah, so I came here 10 years ago. Obviously, when I was excited. I came here because my husband, my boyfriend who was here, then we got married and I moved to come and live here. I'd been here before just to see if I could live here. And, he'd invited me during the summer. He was very clever. Had he invited me during the winter, I might have had a different idea. But, I came in the summer, went back home, thought, it's not too bad. It's not too cold. I could live there. And I came here, and I've always been like a really optimistic sort of person who, I think in the earlier part of my life, I always sort of said, whatever it is, I'm ready for it. So that's my approach to life generally. And so many, for the first sort of half of those 10 years, I was like, whatever this is, I will go through it. I will navigate it. I'll find answers. I will move forward. But with that, I realized after some time that I was hitting my head against a brick wall that was not going to cave in. I had done everything I had done in the earlier part of my career to try and progress, to try and sort of learn more about this and learn about careers here. But I just felt like nothing I did made any much of a difference. And that's when I realized there must be something outside of me, because the only thing that has changed is my environment. I am still the same person. So why am I not getting the same results when I'm applying the same behavior? You should get at least the same results, if not better. And so that was about like 5 years ago. And I think I reached a point when I realized there was something in my environment. And, I have written an article on LinkedIn, which I hope you will share with people. And, the narratives of people that I had heard then finally began to make sense to me. It's about that unleveled playfield. And when I reached that point, I thought, if the playfield is unleveled, then no matter how much I try, there's just sudden, if the goalposts keep changing, this is a very hard job. And at that point I felt like I probably hit rock bottom, to be fair. And that was mixed with, the transition from being, without children and having children and the impact of that on my career. Now in Kenya, when women have children, I do not think it still affects their career, but it's not as here, because you kind of have the support. The society is set up for women to work. I'm not very sure how it's set up here. I am still grappling with this. So I wasn't prepared of what being a working mom here would look like. It just hit. I think I'd seen it, but when you see something without experiencing it, it's completely different. So I reached a point where I just thought, I think I'm just going to give up. I started writing a blog just to keep myself sane. I thought, I'll look for a job sort of in the supermarket at night or something and just enjoy my life writing a blog. I cannot do career here. But then I woke up one day and decided I was going to try something else. And that meant completely changing everything. So I decided to explore a career change. And on this journey, it's the people that I have met who've lent me their time, who've lent me their support. There was the people who just sat there and listened to me as I talked through what I wanted to do and and the difficult experiences that I was having. They did not have answers, but they just listened. And it's taken, this is why I say it takes a village. It literally took a village. I got a scholarship to go to Kingston to go and do my MSc in occupational and business psychology. And, I was very clear about the outcomes that I wanted. And I came out on the other side with the achievements that I wanted. But even with that, I'm really aware. I'm really aware of the obstacles that people face that they don't speak about. And it's a constant sort of something at the back of my mind, and thinking through how can we make this even just a little better. And that's not a one-person job. I think that's a society's job. That's each and everyone, everyone has something they can influence in the way people around them feel and are. And I think some of us, are in our own lanes, and because everything is fine, or any problem that is not our problem is not a problem. And moving away from that. Yeah.
What was the moment when the word impossible then disappeared from your vocabulary? Was it when you completed your studies? Was it when you secured your first portfolio assignment? What was that moment?
So it actually happened when when they announced this scholarship at Kingston, I decided to apply. I wasn't going to be able to. I just felt I couldn't. I had a young child. I didn't want to have more sort of student debt. So I thought, you know what? I'll try to apply for this scholarship, and if I get it, or maybe I won't get it, but then I'll see how it goes. So that was the first thing. And I think the day I won that scholarship, something in me triggered, because I'd had many wins earlier on in my life, in my career. I came out of a school that nobody often at that point came out of to join a public university in my country, because it was, as I said, it was one of the worst. At that point, it was a terrible, terrible school. There was no running water, no electricity, no library. Yeah, and it was in the middle of nowhere. So nobody expected a girl from that sort of background to make it to a public university, to get such good grades. So I had some sort of record of success, but then I think the struggles I'd had when I came here completely wiped those records off of me. And going there and winning that scholarship reminded me of the girl I used to be. and for me, from that day, I think the word impossible just disappeared.
It's a great story. It must have been such an emotional story as well. It is,
yeah.
But it's also, I mean, the way you talk about it though shows your mature approach to the problem initially. I mean, you didn't blame the world. You kind of sat back and went, okay, this hasn't worked. It's not working. It must be, as you said, it's not me that's changing, the environment around me. Something isn't adding up, and it's and then you took action, which is what we need this to do across everything, right? Whether it's diversity and inclusion, whether it's talent. People need to take action, but you took action for yourself. And what a great story. I will share that blog. So you did a blog on it, didn't you, on LinkedIn not too recently?
Yeah, there is a blog on LinkedIn. And, it's really funny because when after, the few days after I wrote this blog, I received, I haven't even shared this message and I still don't know what to do with them. But women from across the globe wrote to me, thanking me for writing this article and telling me that is my story. And it didn't matter whether they were in their sort of original sort of countries where they grew up. So it wasn't an immigration issue. It wasn't a race sort of issue. It was just a women's issue. Women feeling a high sense of I am stuck and overwhelmed. This was resonating with women from across the globe. In the week after I wrote that article, I cried a lot because I just could not believe so many people in the world feeling stuck and overwhelmed just because they're female, and that because they feel that the odds are stacked up against them. And I still have, I read these messages and I'm trying to plan what my next step is, because I have to do something to try and help, which is what they're asking for. So, it was really an overwhelming experience for me. I did not expect that kind of response from across the globe, but I did have it, and it did show me that there is something about when we succeed, do we look back to who we have, who might have fallen the wayside or who might not have made it. And I think we habitually run our race going forward, and sometimes stepping all over dead bodies and never even stopping to recognize who they are. And I think that's not how to be human. I honestly do not think this is how to be human. I think we have to build in time to look back, to look at who's fallen down and why they're falling down, and if there's anything we can do
to pick them back up. I have to say, you're a really inspiring writer. I'm going to talk for you here because I've read it, and I think it does need to be shared, because Your passion comes through in your writing. You're a really inspirational writer as well, and I'm not surprised at all by the following and the support the article got. And I think if people are listening to this, and if you're not inspired already, you definitely can be, because you're holding an event. And let's talk about that. And we met for the first time. We didn't meet through LinkedIn. We're talking about networking. We met through a common friend who we also met. I met through a guy called Woosh, who, again, we didn't meet through LinkedIn. I met Woosh through a separate WhatsApp group, who then introduced me to the CIPD panel, where I met you, where we talked about the subjects, and here we are today. So we're talking about that networking thing and opening communications. That's how we've come to this podcast together. But you're hosting a really exciting event, which you called A Million Dreams, which is actually similar to your article headline as well. But I know it's designed to really help women, and that's all kinds of women, make really big leaps in 2020 and beyond. So you are an inspirational woman, and if people are looking to be inspired, I think this is a really, really great opportunity for anyone listening to this to get involved. So can you talk to us a little bit about the event? I'll obviously put a link in the episode notes. People can sign up to the event. There are tickets and things there, which they can do. But I wonder if you could just bring the event to life for those listening, for those that might be interested in attending.
Yes, absolutely. So I realized that even in the time when I was struggling, when I thought I wanted to give up, something haunted me. I was haunted by my dreams. I really was, because I've always been a dreamer. There's just stuff that I've always wanted to do. And those things don't die, whether you're achieving, where you're living, whether you're working towards your potential or whether you have given up. Those dreams will never leave you. And there is nothing as haunting as an unfulfilled potential. I know the pain of an unfulfilled potential and how that can haunt you. There's that. I was inspired by The Greatest Showman. A million dreams are keeping me awake. And I remember the first time I watched that movie, I cried. I was with my kids. I was trying not to show that I was crying, but I was crying because that line in that song just hit me. It just hit me. I'm like, yes, they are. These dreams are keeping me awake. And I just imagine that there are many, many people who, because of the circumstances and what's happened, they've seen that what impossible has creeped into their sort of vocabulary and their way of living. And one thing I know, that even when that word creeps into your vocabulary, your dreams don't die. They're still there. You will be awake at night. And this event was because I managed to face my dreams. I haven't achieved my dreams yet, but I'm walking towards them. And this event is about reigniting those dreams. It's about recognizing that those dreams are not going to die. So we might as well wake up and work towards them. I wanted to share something of my journey with women. I can't reach all the women right now because they're in different parts of the world, those who've written to me, but there will be a webinar which I will put out in due course. But I wanted to put a safe space where women who kind of live within sort of travel distance can come together and work on something. It's always, you said the word action. There's a small action that you can take towards your dreams. And so that's what the event was. It's on in Eventbrite. So I want to give, I have a lovely panel of women that have agreed to work with me on this event that I think that those who come will really enjoy. We're going to explore topics such as the impact that you want to create. I do not think there's a single human being that lives on this earth that doesn't want to create some sort of impact for themselves or for the people around them. If this is not the reality for you, then, it's a bit of a situation. And so if you go to the event, there's some questions that can just help people get into that frame that would I want to work towards any of these things. If that is you, go to the event, book yourself in. They're selling really quickly, but I'd love, and I've been so fortunate since I put this event out that I did have a sponsor contact me, someone I used to work for, Professor Peter Saville, and he agreed to contribute towards this, sponsoring this event. So that's why we are able to hold what is a really fantastic and affordable event at the cost of £20 per ticket. We wouldn't have been able to do that because we are at the Hilton. But because of the generosity of other people that I have met along my journey and them coming on board to support my journey, I really didn't want cost or money to be a reason why some women did not attend this event. So it's really open. It's open to everybody. If you have something to contribute, then you should come and hold someone else's hand. If you want to if you want help for yourself, you just want to be inspired or work towards something, this is an event for everybody. And it's one of its kind. We don't know if we'll get funding for future events. If there's someone listening to this who would like to partner, who would like to run events in their organizations, working with women, or just, these are subjects for everybody, actually. I've had many men asking, why are we not welcome? And I'm like, I'll get to you, just wait a little bit. So yes, so if the organization that would like to run this kind of events, I'm opening them up. I will be opening them up in the spring, and we'll be running them in organizations, in communities, and I'd like as many people as possible to be involved.
Fantastic. So just to summarise there, it's an event called A Million Dreams. What's waited till tomorrow starts. It's a game changers event. It's going to be time for reflection, motivation, goal setting. There's going to be breakfast. It's on March the 28th. It's at the Doubletree by Hilton Hotel in Woking on the 28th of March. So if you're interested, there will be a link on this podcast where you can access that, and hopefully you'll come along to the event and be inspired as I was by Margaret. I know it'll be a real adventure if she's involved. So hopefully people listening to this can get involved, and they'll see you there to network and find out a little bit more as they go forward.
Absolutely. I look forward to seeing everybody.
Absolutely. Well, that kind of brings us to a close. It's been a fantastic podcast. I could talk to you all day about these subject areas. I feel like there just isn't enough time to tackle all these issues, but I will say it's been a fantastic talk. If people want to find out more, they can go to your website, which is, again, I'll put in the episode notes if you want to find it quickly, but it's inclusivevillage.com. Particularly if you are an HR manager listening to this and you really want to find out more about how you can develop your corporate culture model, then Margaret is the person to get in touch with. So all of our contact details will be on the episode notes, and obviously you can access them through her website as well. I will also put a link to your Game Changers event, which you just mentioned, and to your LinkedIn blog and a LinkedIn connection if you want to connect with Margaret directly as well. Of course, if you are listening to this, you're an HR and L&D professional and you have an HR or L&D related vacancy that you need some support with, do give me a call. I'm a specialist HR recruiter as well as a podcast host, and I would love to show you what a great HR experience can look like. So you can reach me directly at nick@jgarecruitment.com, or you can give me a call 01727 800 377. Just leaves me to say a huge thank you to Margaret. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed every second of this conversation. It's been fantastic, insightful, and educational, I hope, for those who really are passionate about evolving their cultures and their businesses.
Thank you, Nick. It's been a great pleasure. It's been a great pleasure to share this podcast with you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Pleasure's all mine, and I will look forward to speaking to you all on the HR L&D podcast real soon. Take care.
Thank you so much for tuning into the HR L&D podcast with your host, Nick Day of JGA HR Recruitment. If you need help with a current HR or L&D vacancy, then please get in touch with Nick and his team. All contact details can be found in the episode notes. In the meantime, to make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe to the show through any of your favourite podcast channels. Till next time.